So this is a project we've given the acronym Rodent Gate to, but actually the longer name of it is really about what we had this issue again with the Netherlands banning rodenticides, thinking this was going to be a problem across Europe, and what are particularly livestock farmers going to do when this happens, and with rodents just running rampant on their farms already in many situations, how are we going to control it? So this is a project that is across Europe with some of my colleagues in other countries. So it's funded through a mechanism where each country puts money into a pot. So it's slightly different from a lot of European Union funding, which has been great for us. Being out of the European Union, we can still participate in these things. So if you actually go to this website, icrad.eu, you can see all the different projects they're funding that are around disease issues in livestock. So this is just one project they've funded through this mechanism. So other countries besides Europe are involved in this. So you have Turkey and parts of the Middle East that have also put money into this pot so they can participate. So that's just a sort of broader context of how the money is given to us, and we hope these things will continue into the future. So this project is really about, what we tried to focus on pigs and chickens because we feel the impact of rodents in those sectors are probably the highest in terms of disease transmission. But when we really started getting down to it, we realized that where is the evidence? Again, there's a lot of anecdote. What is the impact of rodents on a disease transmission? But actually, there's a lot of it is just unsubstantiated. We believe they're involved in these things, whether it's salmonella transmission or other kinds of diseases. Sometimes it's very clear that rodents are a reservoir, so therefore they must be involved. But sometimes there may be just spreading the disease around, just sort of mechanical transmission. They're either just picking it up on their feet and walking somewhere else, or maybe it's just going through the digestive system. So there's lots of different ways that rodents can transmit disease. And again, we just felt we really didn't understand what happens when a farm closes. Where do all those rodents go? Are they going to other farms nearby? Are they bringing diseases with them? So there's a lot of biology, basic biology, in trying to understand the role of rodents in transmission of disease. So that's a big part of our project. And then really another focus of it was then, well, what do we do if rodenticides are taken off the market? What are the other options there? And try to develop or at least get some understanding of what might be possible in terms of new technology to move forward. So you can see that, as I was just trying to say, the means that rodents might be involved in disease transmission to livestock can be varied. So you can just have, up here, we're referring to sort of wild rodents, and down here more the commensal rodents. And so you may have wild rodents picking up diseases from other animals in the environment, whether that's wild birds or other things that are out there, and giving that to commensal rodents, or it may be via their ectoparasites being transferred onto the livestock themselves. Or you may have diseases in the livestock that then are given to the rodents. So it could be going both directions there, and then those rodents spread it to other places. So we were really interested in all sort of three potential means of rodents being involved in disease transmission. Okay, that's probably quite small to see, but essentially with a lot of these things you have what we call work packages, sort of subsets of activities that we're trying to develop. So the first of that is really just about trying to identify what pathogens are we finding in rodents themselves. Are they the same pathogens we're finding in the livestock animals on the same farms? And then try to understand the dynamics of those diseases. So what we were trying to do up here is we had different kinds of farm contexts. So depending on the farming practices, some of those might be quite stable, where, if you think of like an egg-laying facility, it's pretty stable, and then there'll be a period where all the chickens are taken out and they clean the barn down. So there's periods of instability within farming systems. Sometimes that may be due to outbreaks. So if you have a notifiable disease, suddenly the whole farm has to close and shut down. But also what's happening in parts of Europe is farms are just being shut down. So again, the Netherlands has been probably leading the way in terms of pushing farmers to shut their businesses. They just don't want as much animal production to take place in the country anymore. It's all about climate change and all these other things. So people are being paid to stop farming. And so again, what happens to all those rodents when all these farms are being shut? So we had these sort of different scenarios where you had either stable or places that might be sometimes unstable, or places where there's been absolute chaos, and what's happening with the rodents in those different contexts there. So then trying to assess what's going on there in terms of disease, and then looking at movement studies. I won't talk much about the movement studies. Those are mainly happening in Belgium and Germany. But there's these new technology, essentially using Bluetooth technology to put little radio collars on rats. So we catch them, we put a little Bluetooth emitter on their necks, and then we have Bluetooth gateway towers through the environment that can actually monitor their movement. So it's quite high tech, it's quite new stuff, but it hopefully will allow us to see actual interactions, how much time rodents actually spend coming together for mating or for other reasons. What are the sort of frequencies of contacts there, and put that into a model. It's kind of a mathematical model that looks at how that might affect disease transmission. So I'm not going to talk too much about this. This project hasn't been going on very long yet, so I don't have all the results yet. But then down here, rodent management strategy. So this is more about talking to farmers and even you guys, the pest control industry, to see about what are we doing at the moment, what do we need to think about doing in the future there. So a lot of that hasn't happened yet. Okay, so at the moment, here in the UK, we're trapping rodents on farms in these locations. So we have 4 farms in those 3 locations. So up in Thetford, we have a big pig farm and an egg-laying farm up there. In Malden, we have a smaller sort of pig farm. And then down in Ashford, we have another chicken farm. So 2 pig farms, 2 chicken farms, slightly different contexts in terms of size, location, to try to capture as much as we can in terms of differences between types of farms. So that's what I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with. This is an egg-laying facility, lots of chickens. And most of the pigs that we've seen anyway, they're this sort of indoor-outdoor free range, I guess you would call it. And some other pictures, so you get all these fantastic places for rats along the sort of outside parts of the barns where the feed silos are pumping food in. And so again, just some examples of the places we've been trapping rats. So that's on the big sow breeding location. And it may be difficult for you to see, but this is an area where, again, you can see in the background there you have these big feed silos. And this is just an area of a little forest patch or semi-wild sort of area, and it's just riddled with rat holes. The sand, it's quite a sandy, loamy sand, and they've just burrowed galore in there, and of course the food is right next door. So we're putting out a whole kinds of traps in there to try to catch as many as we can for our surveys. And then what we catch, we dissect in the field itself. So we set up like a little laboratory where we get all our gear out. We pile up our rats in our bags and we dissect them to get out the tissues so that we can look for disease. So again, what we're essentially visiting these farms twice a year in the spring and the autumn. Then we're trapping for a period of nights to catch what we can, and then take a number of samples out of them. We haven't actually caught much of anything else. It's mainly Norway rats and mice that we've been catching. We have caught a few hedgehogs, and of course we let those go when we caught them. But that was one of the issues we were always worried about. Are we going to catch lots of non-pest species? Fortunately, we haven't. So we also take samples from the animals. So this is mainly saliva and poop. So here you can see we just use ropes. We hang those in where the pigs are. They come along and they chew on the rope for a while. Then we can squeeze the saliva out of that and look for diseases in that. The same thing with chickens. We can swab their beaks, and then we can just go along and pick up poop samples from all these different places to look for disease in those. So we don't actually have to do anything invasive to the livestock. And then we bring all these samples back to the lab and start chewing them all up into pieces, getting the DNA and the RNA out of them to look for the presence of different diseases. So, not a lot of detail yet on this. Hopefully next time I come along I'll be able to give you a much bigger picture here. So we have started this sort of genetic screening of some of the samples, and really that's just been on the bacteria coming out of the rodent samples. So we still need to look for viruses in the rodents. We still need to look for the animals themselves, the pigs and the chickens. So what we've found so far is quite high incidence of leptospira, and that should be a bit of a worry. It can be quite debilitating in pigs particularly, and the farmers themselves haven't been noticing this, and also Brachiospira and Lawsonia species of bacteria which are related to certain diseases as well in pigs and chickens too. So the leptospira, of course, can also be a human disease, and of course there are some cases of leptospirosis in humans every year, not many, but this, of course, might be one of the driving forces, the rodents spreading it amongst the animals themselves. But still, we've got to do those animal samples to do it. So what we've really seen again is the chicken farms we've been working with are, even though they're quite varied, between the two farms, one is really sort of a nice, neat, tidy situation, the other one not so much. But they still have much lower rodent issues than the pig farms. And it would be interesting to see what you all think about that, if that's true in your own experience. And surprisingly, we seem to have a much bigger problem with rodents in the UK than the farms in our other study countries, Germany, Belgium, the Netherlands, and Poland. And I think a lot of that is down to, again, animal welfare standards and how we raise our animals here. We do think about animal welfare, and that means it's much harder to control the rodents because there's a lot more sort of feed just being out, and they're open structures. The rats are just coming in and helping themselves. A lot of the farms that I've seen on the continent involved in this project, it's all still closed systems. The idea of free-range pigging and stuff is just not as common in the continent as it is here. So that's certainly an issue for the UK if they were to introduce more bans on things that might be more difficult to control rodents here. So I think there is a correlation between, we haven't really again nailed this down, but I think there is a correlation between what's going on in the UK with higher welfare standards, the way we're doing more free-range outdoor farming versus what goes on the continent. So we still need to look into that more and understand, is that really the case? So that's it. Thanks.
Got to get in there first. Did the farmers have to pay for this high-tech monitoring that you were doing?
No, in fact, we put out surveys because we just wanted farmers to be involved. We thought a lot of farmers may not want to be involved in this because they're paranoid we might be reporting all sorts of notifiable diseases on them. Yeah. But the reality is it takes a long time to do this. So it's not like the surveillance that's done for notifiable disease. It's months later before we get a result. And that reassured a lot of farmers. And so it was really voluntary. So and it still is voluntary. If they said we don't want to be involved anymore, we have to stop. But that was an important part of us. We wanted support from the farmers because we're not invasive too much. We're only there for a few days, but we need to get access, and people are worried about people coming onto farms spreading diseases themselves. So we've been very clear we're following strict protocols and things like that. So
this is the problem we have, in that they're not prepared to pay for us to come in and carry out high-tech monitoring either.
Yeah.
And if the food industry was, then they'd have fewer problems.
Yeah.
And it seems to me that having pest-free conditions is a right rather than a responsibility.
Yeah.
And even a member of the public, they'll spend 30,000 quid on a new kitchen, but they won't spend 200 quid on having the pest-free. They think that's too much.
There's a lot of apathy out there on farms, I find. The number of rats on these farms is incredible. And some of the farmers will complain because particularly in these automated feeding systems, most of the feed is being delivered in the day. That's when the animals are eating. But there are people living there who hear the equipment switch on in the middle of the night. And that's because rats are down in the feeder, eating the feed straight out of it, causing more feed to go in there. And some people are estimating maybe 20% of their food, 30% of their food is being eaten by rats. And yet they still don't really do much about it, I find. You can just, you go around in the evening there, and a lot of these guys are hunting. They've got their guns out there, or they hire people to do it. And I've been there with them, and around sort of dusk period, there are just hundreds of rats running from this building to that building, and they shoot maybe a dozen of them, but it's had really no impact.
What we need to do to encourage our customers, be it farmers all the way through to supermarkets, to be prepared to pay a reasonable amount to maintain their premises pest-free, which is what the law requires.
Yeah. No, and I think The only times that's ever really been a difference is when there is a crisis. So when you have an influenza outbreak, then people, they run around and try to do something about it. But a lot of these things are chronic issues. The farmers don't really care because it doesn't really, or they don't notice that's affecting their production. You know, maybe there's a bit of weight loss or things going on, which they don't appreciate because there is no data, because no one's collecting the data. It's like one of these, if we don't know about it, it's all swept under the carpet, and there's no evidence, so we just carry on. So again, it's all about awareness raising and trying to, again, make people understand that they're losing money in some very concrete ways, just how much food is being eaten. But again, they don't even know that. And that's something I've done a lot in Africa to raise awareness about people there. They have these, again, these are for human consumption, for small stores of food. Rats are going in there, and then we come in and we show them how they can protect their food in a more effective way, and then suddenly their eyes are open. Oh wow, our food lasts 3 months longer now. For them, that's really important. How to get one of these large-scale operations to make the same economic realizations requires data that's not being collected. So it gets very frustrating, and I sympathize with you all in that sense. How do we actually make farmers behave in a better way when what they're really trying to do is, they've got to think about animal welfare and all these other things which are probably driving some of the problems they have. So again, I don't have the solutions, but I think this kind of data might help some of the farmers motivate. One of the farmers we were talking about this high incidence of leptospirosis on his farm, and you go, oh really? And I'm sure if they started to actually systematically look at what is that impact, they would see that it is something worth trying to fix. But so far they haven't. So
you've written about diseases, but also what sort of levels of parasites are you finding on the
yes, we've been taking all the parasites off I should have mentioned that. So we're taking all the ticks and fleas and everything else that we find on there, putting those into vials, and the plan is to screen those as well. But certainly this last season in the spring, we had a very high load on a lot of them. So on an individual, maybe 20, 30 parasites being taken off an individual Norway rat. Some will be completely clean, and then you'll find others that are just really absolutely covered. So again, we're hoping to get a student involved in some of that, which is why we're kind of saving it for now. So.
Is any study being done with the bird flu and the way rodent control in rodents itself?
Yeah. Well, we know that rodents can transmit bird flu already, so that's well established. So if you give influenza to a rat, it can maintain it, it can excrete it and spread it from between farms or on farms or within their own populations. So it is known to be a transmitter to birds, and also to get it from birds. So wild birds can give it to rodents, and those rodents we know can give it to our chickens and other poultry things. But again, in an actual farm context, no one seems to believe it's an issue that maybe is perpetuating some of the problems within. There's still problems up in Norfolk and other areas where they've relaxed the rules, but really it hasn't gone away. There's still outbreaks going on, but this is it. No one is linking this to rodents.
One of my customers actually had the bird flu this year.
Yeah.
20,000 birds were destroyed.
Yeah.
But one shed had bird flu, but the other shed didn't.
Mm.
And yet they've been crossing over from this.
Yeah, yeah.
They'd get rid of both sheds, obviously.
Yeah, yeah.
But the clean-out cost is phenomenal.
Of course it is, yeah, yeah. Then you've got to shut down, and it takes, weeks.
Yeah. And now that was a rearing unit, which went on to go on the laying site, which is now shut down because there's no birds to replace them.
Yeah, yeah.
So that farm's lost potentially £1 million now.
Yeah.
And
And what is the role of rodents? I can't answer that. No one can answer that. I strongly believe they are involved, but until we get more evidence, it's just anecdote again. It's just like, well, we think so, but until we have that evidence, I don't think we're going to motivate farmers to really change.
So you can actually carry the
Oh yeah, absolutely. That is, you can find many papers and research that have shown that already. They carry it, they acquire it from wild birds, and they can transmit it to domestic flocks. So.
One last quick question. Are you surprised by the results you've seen? Are you not surprised?
I was surprised by the high incidence of leptospirosis because, again, no one's really been talking about it. I mean, Lawsonia and Brachiospira so far are quite low, but we still have several seasons to still collect rodents, and it may be, you know, other things are, you know, they come in cycles and things like that. We haven't done any of the viruses, and there's quite a few important viruses in there that we're hoping to target. So it's still early days. I think the leptos did surprise me that, you know, it's more than 25% of the rat population. So that's got to be having an impact.